Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, where we are now in our third season of helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchuk, dietitian, running coach, twin mom, and fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchuk Performance Nutrition, I've spent over a decade helping runners learn to fuel their bodies better, unlock their best running performances, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. This podcast is all about helping you become the very best runner you can be by teaching you the running-specific nutrition, training, and recovery strategies that you need to reach all your wildest health, fitness, and running goals. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, join me each week as I share my best advice, interview guest experts, and talk to everyday runners who are conquering their goals by tapping into the power of performance nutrition, with a side of some myth busting too. And if you're looking for even more tips, resources, and strategies for runners, you can find me on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian or by visiting www.stephanienatchuk.com. All right, let's dive into today's episode. Start today's episode, I just want to really quickly invite you to download my free fueling guide and strength training guides for runners. Currently available as a handy little bundle for you all in one at the link in the show notes. So just to give you more information, in this free fueling guide, you're going to find my top fueling tips for runners. As well, in there, I've put together some meal ideas and even a couple of recipes for your pre and post run fuel. We've also got some suggestions for what to fuel with during your run to make sure that you just have the best overall performance possible. If you've really been struggling to understand what to eat, when, where to start when it comes to supporting your running with better nutrition, this guide is here to help you kickstart your running journey. The other guide that I mentioned is my strength training guide for runners. We know that runners are notoriously bad at consistently getting their strength training in. So this guide includes both a PDF resource, it's got some tips, some guidelines, as well as a link to my series on YouTube where I walk you through all the exercises in this program, giving you some suggestions on proper form, how to modify if needed, how to progress things if needed. This is a really great beginner's guide to strength training for runners who want an effective but efficient full body workout that is going to support the key muscles and movements you need to run stronger and help stay injury free. So once again, both of these guides are available as a handy little bundle. So you just click on the link in the show notes, enter your email address once, and both of the free guides are going to get sent to your inbox right away. I really hope that you find these guides helpful and that they support you and your running goals in the most effective way possible. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. I want to thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode, which I think is a really important one. Although it may be a little bit of some bad news today, might be a little bit of a downer of an episode. For those of you who enjoy to have an odd alcoholic beverage here and there, today we are talking about alcohol and its impacts on your training, your performance, and of course, your overall health. And so, this episode has been on my mind for a long time because I think it's a topic that a lot of people maybe aren't aware of, the impacts that alcohol can have on our performance and our training and our health at levels that are pretty low from what we might have thought, and certainly much lower levels than what our previous guidelines and recommendations around alcohol would sort of give us. So I'm going to explain what I mean by all of that as we kind of dive into today's content. But I think it's a really tricky one because, alcohol for a lot of us just culturally is so ingrained in so many aspects of our society, of our social life, of our traditions. Like it's something that is so commonplace and almost seen as a must in a lot of situations. And while that has certainly been shifting in recent years. I mean, a lot of people are re-examining their relationship with alcohol, the amount that they're drinking, maybe even choosing to go completely alcohol free in their lives. And wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, today we're really going to break down, what that looks like. If you want to continue to have some alcohol as part of your lifestyle, how can we maybe still optimize that around your training and performance and things. And of course, if you choose to not have any alcohol in your life at all, then how that might benefit you from a training, performance, and health perspective. So I want to, of course, come bring you this episode, full disclosure for me personally. I am someone who does have the occasional alcoholic beverage. I do not completely abstain from alcohol in my life. When, there have been times in my life when I certainly have had more alcohol compared to say now. But of course, I've got young kids at home. I'm a mom now. So certainly my weekends look a lot different than they did when I was in my 20s. But I don't want to be kind of here. I don't want you to sort of feel like I'm bringing you this episode as somebody who, completely has no alcohol in their life and is, trying to make you feel bad or, bringing any shame or judgment. I just want this to be about the facts. And, if that influences you going forward and you make changes or think about things differently, then that's fine. And if not, and this isn't an episode for you, then that's okay too. But I just want to have, kind of full clarity about, sort of where I'm at with that. So let's dive into this topic. The sort of culture around running and drinking is definitely something that, with sort of a return to in-person events, the rise of the run club, people getting together and running and socializing, and even some run clubs becoming almost like a proxy dating service, or some of them even having this sort of meeting other local people, meeting other single people, and kind of getting together to socialize. Alcohol and drinking has sort of become part of that in a lot of circles. There's even, some run clubs that are hosted and run out of establishments that serve alcohol, whether it's a restaurant or a brewery or something like that, that again, alcohol is just sort of part of the culture of that run club space. And of course, a lot of runners enjoy social drinking, and it's a way that we unwind, we relax, we get together with friends. And sometimes maybe the more we're training, the more we are using alcohol as that sort of source of relaxation and enjoyment, a little treat after a hard training session, that sort of thing. And the challenge with that, or sort of the downside of that, is that, alcohol, particularly right after a workout, is kind of not the ideal time to be having alcohol. And during our highest volumes of training, our highest seasons of training, is another time that alcohol has, further detriments to our performance as runners, and particularly when it comes to things like recovery. So, to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk a bit about alcohol specifically, this is something that people may not be aware of, is that, of course, alcohol is in fact a toxin, right? Alcohol is a drug. It is a toxin that our body needs to get rid of. So as soon as alcohol enters the body and is in the bloodstream, the liver gets to work removing it, right? And metabolizing it, taking it out of the bloodstream, right? Detoxifying the alcohol. And our liver is what does that. And so when we have alcohol in our system, our liver is busy and prioritizes metabolizing alcohol over other functions. And this is going to be other functions that include things like recovery, includes things like storing muscle glycogen. Also, of course, the calories that we get from alcohol need to be used and need to be burned because we can't store them. And so we are going to be using those calories for energy demands versus using calories from like the food we eat for energy demands. So in addition to it having potentially a negative impact on things like recovery and interfering with other metabolic functions that our body is needing to do, we also have to remember that alcohol is a source of calories. In fact, it's a very dense source of calories, and it's not just the sugar. So a lot of people think about, say, in a glass of wine or in a beer, right, the sugar or the carbs that we get from those. And so they might feel as though switching to something else, like a hard alcohol, that this is, dramatically different. And it is, right, because we don't have the sugar or the carbohydrates, but the actual alcohol itself has calories. In fact, alcohol is quite calorie dense in that it gives us 7 calories per gram. Now, to just compare, protein and carbohydrates each have 4 calories per gram. Fat has 9. So alcohol is closer to fat calories than it is protein and carbohydrate calories. And it's very calorically dense. So something like vodka, for example, right, which has no additional carbohydrate or sugar in it, it's just the alcohol calories. You're looking at about 60 calories per shot or 60 calories per ounce. So if you're having, a few drinks a day, or even on a weekend, having, a number of drinks in a day, we are looking at potentially several hundred additional calories that we've taken in that we need to use as energy immediately because we don't have a way to store those calories. And so then the calories from the food that we've eaten that day are going to be stored because we need to be able to store what we can and burn what we need to. And so, having a lot of excess calories coming into our diet from alcohol can very quickly put us over our total calorie needs for the day, which is where people who tend to drink a lot of alcohol can see some unwanted weight gain over time, especially, abdominal fat gain, and of course, experience negative health impacts of liver health and liver function and everything there too. So the calories are sort of one piece of the puzzle. But the second piece of it is going to be looking at alcohol's impacts on our performance. Now, of course, drinking alcohol, say like before we train, like having a drink or two before we went out for a run or before we went out for a workout, definitely can be problematic. And I think a lot of people probably would know that, but at the same time, depending on your social circle, who you're running with, that sort of thing, maybe to have a drink and then head out for your run, if it's like an evening run club or something, or whatever it might be, wouldn't be out of the question. And so alcohol consumed, especially like before a workout, it has a diuretic effect. So it makes us need to pee more, which means that we can become dehydrated more quickly. It can lead to an inability to control our temperature. So thermal dysregulation, which of course, if we're running in a hot environment, can be really problematic. Because of this dehydration, because of the diuretic effect, it can then lead to reducing our blood volume, making us work harder, increasing something called our rate of perceived exertion during that workout, and increase our risk of things like cramping because of dehydration or the electrolyte losses. So there's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want to have alcohol before we perform, physiologically speaking. We can have difficulties with coordination and reaction time and motor skills and mental focus. And, of course, just a general like higher rate of injury if we have alcohol in our system prior to training. Now, of course, there's a lot of people listening to this episode who are like, Steph, like, come on, I would never drink before I train. Like, obviously, I'm going to have my drink afterwards because like that's when you do it, right? And yeah, it can feel like something, a nice kind of treat, a nice reward, way to sort of relax and unwind after we do a hard workout or a long workout, especially like a long workout on a hot day to come home and have a drink. Like it sounds nice, it really does. But to do this and get that some experience in an alcohol-free way is something that I would really kind of implore you to explore and sort of find a way to still have that experience without a drink that contains alcohol. Because specifically after a workout, we see a lot of issues with having alcohol in our system. It really impairs recovery. Because the body is then needing to metabolize the alcohol and our body is quote unquote busy. Our liver is busy metabolizing the alcohol. We're going to have issues with recovery. And so, the big one is that alcohol increases levels of inflammation in the body and delays these repair and recovery processes. This is both in like our muscles, but also in our digestive system. So we can have gut issues, not just like immediately kind of like while we're drinking or immediately post drinking. But if, say, like the next day, if we're experiencing symptoms of a hangover, if we had quite a bit to drink the night before, we can have some gut issues because of the inflammation, like in our digestive tract. So you want to be really careful about that, having alcohol the night before workouts, long runs, races, etc., because that can contribute and be the cause of some GI distress that we might experience. So we want to be really careful with that. Alcohol also interferes with glycogen replacement. So our body's ability to store glycogen after exercise. So again, if we're in this high training volume, right? Immediately after a hard workout or a long run, that is our body's prime time to be replenishing muscle glycogen and storing that glycogen for our next workout. And when we've done something like a long run where we've depleted our body's muscle glycogen stores, we want to be then replenishing that muscle glycogen and increasing the amount that we have available. So one of the adaptations that happens is that we increase our body's ability to store more glycogen. And so if we're not giving our bodies that glycogen to store for next time, right? We're not optimizing how much muscle glycogen we have on board, and our workout quality, like over time, can really start to suffer because we're just not recovering well, both from like a muscle perspective and repairing that muscle damage, but also from the perspective of having fuel in the tank for our next run. So if we're sitting down and we're recovering, quote unquote, with an alcoholic beverage after a workout, instead of having that protein and carbohydrate kind of balanced meal that our body really needs, then we are really delaying and impairing our recovery, making, impairing what we're going to be able to do, reducing our workout quality for the next training session. So this is something really important. Is it's not just kind of our recovery right in that moment that's delayed, but it also can influence future training and how we do at the workouts that are coming up in the next couple of days. And this is, really problematic for runners who are in a high season of training, right? Who are doing a lot of running. And it's tough because this is a time when you might feel like you need the most relaxation, or you can afford the extra calories, right, during that time. And while that's true, you do need more energy. We need the quality energy, right? Those quality calories, the protein, the carbohydrates that are going to benefit us, and actually, our bodies are going to be able to use those things to improve performance and to train better, rather than alcohol calories that are just going to do more harm than good. We also see a suppression. We can see a suppression of immune system function with alcohol consumption, which of course increases our susceptibility to getting injured. And, like I said, with this increase in inflammation, increasing our risk of injury. And so this is something that's really important to kind of consider, is that, alcohol can have an effect on, of course, our performance sort of in the moment, if we were to say, consume alcohol beforehand. And then we also can see negative impacts of alcohol on, our post-run recovery, in that it delays post-run recovery, both from a muscle repair perspective as well as a glycogen replenishment perspective. And then it can have negative effects on our immune system function, things like hydration, maintaining thermoregulation, maintaining our body's temperature. So there's a lot of negatives. Another really big one is the impact that alcohol can have on sleep. And this is another one that I think that people maybe just aren't as aware of, and don't think, because if you have a drink or two, right, you probably find that it makes you kind of sleepy, right? In the evening, you're sort of relaxing, you have a couple of drinks, you're like, oh, okay. And you fall right to sleep. And some people might find that they need a little bit of alcohol in order to fall asleep at night. But the thing is, alcohol may help you initially fall asleep, but the quality of your sleep and the duration that you sleep can be shortened quite a lot, even by just one drink, certainly by two drinks or more. The more alcohol we have in our system, the crappier the quality of the sleep that we're going to have. And then, we're talking about overall performance and recovery and things like that. It's just all bad news. So when we look at even as little as one drink and the effects that it can have on sleep, we do see detrimental impacts of sleep quality from even just having one drink within 3 hours of going to bed. And this is really important because we sometimes think like, well, what's sort of one drink? And in Canada, like our previous alcohol guidelines, these were updated a few years ago. These are not the current guidelines, but the previous guidelines said that women could have, up to 2 drinks per day, or I think it was 10 drinks over the course of the week was sort of the upper limit or sort of the maximum, in the alcohol guidelines. For men, it was 2 drinks per day. Up to 15 drinks per week was considered like okay. And if you were under that amount, under 15 drinks a week for men, under 10 drinks a week for women, it was like 1 or 2 a day for women, 2 a day for men, something like that, then that was considered fine, right? Like that was considered a low, moderate, or whatever alcohol consumption. And as healthcare professionals, right, as a dietitian, if somebody was within that, then we might, if they were trying to lose weight, reduce body fat percentage, change body composition, then maybe we'd have a conversation about the calories that the alcohol was providing. But it was sort of considered like okay from a health perspective to have that much. That has changed. And so a couple of years ago, this was early 2023, so about 2 years now that these new guidelines came out here in Canada, looking at, they've sort of stratified risk associated with alcohol consumption. So of course, only zero, no alcohol whatsoever, is no risk, right? If you do not drink, then you do not have health risks associated with alcohol consumption. Low risk, the low risk category is 2 drinks per week or less. And that's what's considered low risk drinking. And then there's moderate risk, which I think is 3 to 5. And then beyond 5 is considered high risk. I'm not sure about the exact numbers for the moderate or high risk. But low risk is 2 drinks a week or fewer. This is a huge change. Like this is a very big shift from the previous guidelines and what the previous recommendations had been. And I think it's really worth kind of seeing that not only has it been a shift in terms of the numbers, but also just the way we're thinking about the risk associated with alcohol consumption, right? Being no risk, low risk, moderate risk, high risk. And how we can see that the more we're drinking, the more the risk goes up versus it being like a good, you're good here, you're not good here. Like to have it be, okay, say I drink 15 drinks a week. Well, that's fine. But 16, right? Well, that puts me over. Now that's a problem. Well, no, right? It's sort of this spectrum of risk that we go on. So if you are currently somebody who is having, 1 or 2 drinks or more than that, but even as little as 1 or 2 consistently, say in the evenings before you're going to bed at night, and you are finding that your sleep duration, sleep quality, body composition, right, any of those things are suffering, one of the things that I would really encourage you to look at first and foremost would be, can we make more of your days alcohol free? Again, we're not saying that we have to go to zero entirely. You can if you want to, if that's a goal that you want to have for yourself. But even just getting down to having several alcohol-free days per week is a great start, right? Saving it just for the weekends rather than having 2, making it 1, like wherever we can kind of cut back and cut down is really only going to benefit you from a performance perspective, from a recovery perspective, and from a long-term health perspective. What do we see for those moderate and higher risk categories? Like, what are the risks? Well, of course, it's liver damage and liver disease, which we certainly don't want. Certain types of cancer, we see increased risks for certain types of cancer with excess alcohol consumption, among other, kind of chronic diseases and health conditions, neurodegenerative conditions. So things like dementia, we see an increased risk for that. And then, again, looking at it from this sort of calorie weight balance perspective, increased risks for things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, et cetera. So lots of reasons that we want to moderate and keep our alcohol consumption to a minimum, because there is not a lot of benefit or value in having alcohol. We've sort of seen that, and really only negative impacts from having a lot of it. So if you are, looking at, okay, how do I do this? Like, I don't want to completely abstain. I don't want to go totally alcohol free, but I'd like to start making some changes kind of, where can I look or what can I do? The first thing that I would say is just look at your portion sizes, right? And this is true for a lot of things in life, but I find especially with alcohol, if you go to a restaurant these days, like a standard drink, like what's considered one drink is a 5-ounce glass of wine. But if you go to a restaurant, a lot of restaurants nowadays, you are offered, like a 7-ounce or a 9-ounce, or sometimes even like a 10-ounce glass of wine. Like that's two standard drinks. So just by having a smaller amount, having less at a time, right? Not ordering that second 10-ounce glass because now we're at 4 drinks for the day. You might have thought you only had two, but each one was two, right? Not having things that are doubles. If you're pouring yourself a drink, measuring, what is 1 ounce versus just maybe free pouring or intentionally making yourself a drink that is 2 or 3 ounces. The other thing is to go into it with the intention of having multiple days throughout the week that you don't have any alcohol. So rather than making it a habit of having a drink or two every day, making sure that you are having at least a couple days a week that you're not having any. And trying to avoid alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime. So, specifically talking about this angle of sleep quality and the negative impacts of sleep quality, we know how important sleep is for recovery and for overall health and reducing chronic disease risk and everything like that. So, making sure that if we are having a drink on a particular day, we are not having any alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime. And the purpose of that is so that essentially your body has metabolized the alcohol. That alcohol is no longer in your system by the time you're going to sleep. So it's not having a negative impact on your sleep quality because it's already been dealt with. It's already been metabolized. It's no longer in your bloodstream. So that's really the goal. Of course, the other thing is finding alcohol-free beverages that you enjoy. There's so much stuff on the market these days for alcohol-free cocktails, wines, um, spirits, beers, you name it. There are, I mean, in my city here in Winnipeg, we have an entire store that only sells alcohol-free products. And when I was pregnant, it was nice to go there and kind of see some different options and try some different things. Now, of course, a lot of these products still have sugar. They might have quite a bit of added sugar, still have calories, et cetera. So that's one thing that we do want to be aware of, is that just because we've gone to having no alcohol doesn't mean we want to necessarily have like a whole bunch of some of these products, because we are still going to be getting a lot of added sugars that we potentially don't want in our diet. Outside of using that as a fuel source or something during a workout. So just something to keep in mind. But it does give us a lot of options. And even like restaurants these days, I'm finding so many restaurants have alcohol-free cocktail menus, are serving alcohol-free wines and beers. Like the options that are available to us are just so prevalent. Like there's just so much available there to choose from. So it's really, really nice if you're looking for some different options when you're out socializing. And you can make your own versions of things at home as well that don't need to have alcohol in them too. So making the same drink that you might normally make for yourself, but just skipping the alcohol, is also something that might feel weird at first and feel maybe kind of silly, and you're like, oh, the point of this, like that sort of thing. But it definitely can just become more habitual, especially if then you are seeing benefits in terms of performance improvements, maybe benefits in terms of sleep quality, benefits in terms of body composition changes. Sometimes that's enough motivation to really continue with what we're doing here. So I hope that gives you a little bit of information for today's episode. Like I said, this one's been on my mind for a while. It's something that I've wanted to talk about on the podcast for a long time. And I think that it's just a really kind of important topic, kind of not really a hot topic, I would say, but an important topic, and something that, I just want you to think about if you are currently drinking, more than those couple of drinks a week that I mentioned, and kind of in that moderate to higher risk category, especially if you're noticing that there are some detrimental influences on your sleep, on your performance, on your weight, kind of on anything, then this might be a really simple, first step, not always easy, right? It's not always easy to change our habits, but a simple first step to getting you a little bit closer to where you want to go with your goals for this year. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you got some good takeaways here. And of course, if you have comments, if you have questions, you can certainly leave those here on Spotify, or you can connect with me over on Instagram at Steph the Runner's Dietitian, and I would love to chat with you. If you're looking for more help with your nutrition, with coaching as a runner, if you just want someone to help you create that roadmap for success, then I would love to help you. We currently have space in my online program for runners called the Fuel, Train, Recover Club. This is my one-stop shop for all things running. We cover everything from nutrition for every season of training you find yourself in. We have training plans that you can follow along. They're fully customizable training plans. We have information, education modules on everything from like how to eat, what to eat when, giving you meal ideas, recipes, how to recover faster between workouts, all the things. So if you are looking for some help really becoming the best runner that you can be and you want to start now, then I would love to see you inside the Fuel, Train, Recover Club. You can get more details at the link in the show notes. All right, that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank you one last time for tuning in, and we will see you right back here next week for an all new episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.